Hello! My name is James, and you're watching Macabre Manscaped, the most ill-titled music-based channel on YouTube. I was going to start off on a collection update, first one of the year. However, I realized that I still need to, ruminate on some of those releases. Instead, I've decided to move on to a Libris. This is the last of my Bs, and as promised, this will be a lot less heavy on the heavy metal. This is going to be a lot of pop and we'll get to it. It's different. So first up, though not everything will be metal, this certainly is. This is Beyond the Black, their debut album, Songs of Love and Death, released originally by, I don't know what label that was. It was Air Force One, I believe. And this is actually a 2019 Napalm Records press. They recently announced, a couple months ago, that they actually now switched labels from Napalm to Nuclear Blast. So we'll see how, what manifests in their career later on when they actually gets going. But this is, I'm kind of confused by this band because it is from what I can tell, a manufactured band. So the singer, I don't know what her deal is. I am kind of curious to know how she got where she is now. But this singer won a singing competition in Germany. She's a German singer and was part of this girl group for a short while. They released an album in 2011. And from what I can tell, that was the last thing that she did in her career before transitioning to this a couple years later. And this album is fine. It's some songs are really strong, but some of them are definitely they got a bunch of songwriters together and they kind of put, they wrote an album that wasn't necessarily for their own work. It was for someone else to, take and fly off with into the sunset. So it definitely has some missteps, maybe some songs that don't necessarily have that cohesion. Listening to this, because I've heard this and their second album, that's how I actually found this band, is through their second album. That tells me, listening to this, I feel like they could only really go up. And it's not because this is a bad album. This is actually a pretty decent album. I can put it on. I can enjoy it. Very little complaints from me about this album. It's just, if you add that layer of authenticity to it later on, I feel like you can only get better until eventually, as most bands do, they start progressively getting worse. Hasn't happened yet, as far as I know. I haven't actually listened to the last two albums that they've released. I've been meaning to. That's just part of me being bad at keeping up with new music, which I decided to change this year. More on that in a different video. So yeah, Beyond the Black, Songs of Love and Death, fun, poppy, really clean, slickly produced symphonic metal for the masses. And there's no I don't know. There's nothing bad about that. It simply is. Next up, a poppier act, period. This is Billie Eilish's debut album, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? Released in 2019, if I remember correctly. I don't know what I have to say about it, other than, everyone has talked about this artist before. I really like this album. I've not really listened to the new one. It's very low energy, but some of the songs definitely have this callback to mid-2000s pop music, like My Strange Addiction, I think, is that. It's just fun. It's a downer, but it's fun. I enjoy listening to it. Especially that my favorite song is Elo Milo. I don't know how to say it. It's apparently named after a video game. I don't know. It's just really good pop, trap-ish, alt-pop music. I like it. Next up is Bjork. I'm sorry, Björk. Rhymes with Jack, according to her. And this is her quote-unquote debut album. It's really her second album, but it's called debut because I believe her first album was released when she was a 14-year-old. I don't really know Bjork's deal personally, actually. So this is her first album, released in 1993, I believe, on Elektra Records. And this is trip-hop, electronic, I want to say electronica-ish, but not as much as her later stuff. I've never personally been able to fully connect with this album. I find some of the songs really good. I love Human Behavior, but after that, I kind of have a hard time listening to it. It doesn't, grab my attention. Even I feel like the other ones that people really love off of this one are Venus as a Boy and Big Time Sensuality, and the Anchor song. And honestly, very little about this album other than Human Behavior does anything for me. That being said, Post, the next album, 1995, released on, I believe, also Electrica. This is a 2006 Atlantic Recording Corporation. Okay, so released in 1995 on Atlantic Records or Recordings. This is a 2006 version. It has the one side is the CD and the other side is a DVD, I believe. They did that. This is much more artsy, electronic, has a lot more levity to it, and I just think it's all around a much better record. This is like, you know, what if you don't know Bjork from Human Behavior, you probably know her from Army of Me or her cover of It's Oh So Quiet, which are also great, but just it's a great record through and through. It's like emotional and electronic and dancey, and it's great. Especially like Isobel and, you know, Possibly Maybe are some of my favorites. And, you know, of course, the It's Oh So Quiet and Army of Me, obviously. Bjork, Post. And the last album I have by her, by no means the only three that I want, but, you know, haven't bought more. That would be Homogenic, her third album, 1997, I believe, or 1998. I should do some research on this. 1997, Elektra Records. This is, again, much more electronic than the debut, but this is also a lot more spacey. Like, that's the only way I can describe it. Like, there's some awesome string arrangements, and the melodies are infectious, and, like, I don't know, this is the kind of, like, electronic and pop music that, like, speaks to me. But yeah, it's very different. I don't know how to describe it. Like, this has Hunter and Yoga and Unravel and Bachelorette, all neon, like, it's just banger after banger after banger. This is, like, peak, like, the pinnacle of Bjork for me. I've no real interest in her much later, like, experimental avant-garde, random noises played on instruments for various amounts of time and grumbling over it. It doesn't really speak to me. But Homogenic is phenomenal. Next up is I have Blackmore's Night. Their, I believe, third album, Fires at Midnight. I have two copies of this because they are two different editions. I have the Minstrel Hall music version, which was the one of these two I first bought, that I was hoping to replace my version that I had, which had a hidden track attached to the last song. Like, you know, the last song is like a minute and a half, and there's like another minute and a half of silence before it picks up again into another song. And this version, the Minstrel Hall version, does not have that hidden song. And I wanted it, so I went ahead and found this copy on eBay for pretty cheap as well. And I went ahead and got it, and no regrets, no looking back. Both are fine. Like, if you don't care about the hidden track, don't worry about it. I wanted it. But yeah, so this is like neo-medieval folk rock, especially like this album leans into the rock aspects more than what I remember the other, albums I've heard by them do. So they're typically going to be playing some like medieval instruments, some lutes and stuff, but also like have some acoustic guitar and pianos and all that jazz. But here they actually like plug in and you get some like nice, not super hard rock, but like, some like rock distortion, and it changes the mood of the songs really, really nicely. So like Village on the Sand is very rocky, and so is the title song. Just great. I love it. Like, this is phenomenal. I've been meaning to look into this band more, and there's a few of their other albums I have on my want list, but from what I have, this is it. And then this one band used to be considered metal. I've noticed in the last 15 or so, in the last 10 or so years, they've slowly been reassessed as a metal band, and that would be Bloodflowerz. I have all three of their records now. The third one, Dark Love Poems, I actually got during Christmas, so this will not be part of my holiday haul coming up, but just know that I did get it in the last month. Anyways, so first up, 2002's Diabolic Angel. This is my favorite of the three by far, and it is a grand old time. It's like a mix. This band always like existed in this like liminal space, this like in between of like gothic metal and like hard rock and alternative rock And they were kind of in that space that maybe I don't know who takes up that niche. Like maybe Evanescence takes up that niche, but like different than Evanescence. Um, and maybe like Love Like Blood, I believe is a German band that used to be a goth band but slowly transitioned into more metally sounds. Kind of like that space. So this came out in 2002 on Silver Dust, and it's great. So they have some of, as you do, because at the time it was like mandatory that if you did a gothic metal album, you had to at least have one song that had like Middle Eastern or like East Asian, influences. So like that's the title track on this album. Diabolic Angel has some of that, but the rest of it is just like hard hitting, like just some nice melodic hard rock with some like cool keyboards, some heavy metal parts here and there, and like very punky, unrefined vocal delivery. And this is probably the most refined the singer sounds in the entire career of the band. She only becomes more and more not sloppy, like that's not the word, but maybe a little less perfectionist as a singer. So we'll get into that. Next, their second album was Seven Maledictions, released in 2003. This is a much more of a new metal album, and production-wise, really, really dry. So, like most new metal, from what I consider to be like actual like new metal, like Korn and stuff like that, and Cold Chamber and Limp Bizkit, they had this like mucky quality to the music. This doesn't really have that quality. It's really dry sounding, almost to a fault, because it kind of makes listening to it kind of like it's an abrasive experience to some extent. It's also just even though it's 14 tracks, it's the concept is 7 songs to represent the deadly sins, and then 7 other songs to represent the virtues or whatever they're called. And so it's 14 tracks long, and so obviously it's going to be a longer album, but like by density or length, like average length of songs, it's much shorter than the debut, which kind of also takes away the ability for the songs to breathe and makes some of the arrangements kind of feel a little rushed, right? But whenever they hit some gold on it, they do really well. Like there's some like great material here, and then some that just kind of like maybe this was filler, and like that is just going to be like the reality situation if you're writing 14 songs for an album and you know that they're going to be 14 songs. But yeah, I still really like it. Definitely their weakest album by far, but really enjoyable. And also maybe something that also kind of puts me off from it is the like gothic and symphonic elements that were like even like sparsely used in the debut. They were more likely to use that like wishy-washy goth like guitar tone to be that extra layer of ambience on top. This album even pulls away from that kind of like, again, it's like a much drier album. So there's not as much keyboard or synths or symphonic elements here, and I think it'd be slightly better or like a little less abrasive if they added more of those elements in. And their third album and last album, this is 2006's Dark Love Poems. This is actually, I believe, this is the first time that they actually recorded with Alexander Kroll of Atrocity and Leaves Eyes, and he owns Master Sound Studio. And you can kind of feel Alexander's like fingerprints all over it. Like it leans into more symphonic elements. It definitely plays a lot more in that goth world. There's like some solo violin on one song, The King and the Fool, by far my favorite song on the album. There's also a sham that shows up in another song, which is also a great song. So a sham is like a medieval instrument that kind of sounds kind of buzzy like a kazoo, but I really like the sham. I know that's like a unpopular opinion if you like run in those circles. I like the sham. But yeah, so this was their last album. It was supposed to have a slipcase. I unfortunately did not receive the slipcase. This is the only book of theirs that's super papery. Something that goes with the mid-2000s bands doing a lot of Middle Eastern and East Asian sound influence comes with some like Orientalism in the artwork. That's a thing. And it's things that did not age well, but the album is still great. I really like the album. And yeah, so it kind of bridges the divide between the first two. It's like has some more like new metal style hard rock riffing, like the second album, but definitely leans into more gothic and symphonic sounds that maybe put it more in line with the debut and the other, fucktillion gothic metal bands that were out during this time doing stuff. It's really good. I like it. Next up is Britney. Hashtag she's free now, I think. I haven't actually kept up, but I hear things are going well for her now. So good for her. So I only have 2 of her albums. This is In the Zone, 2003. Very, how do I describe it? It's definitely of its time. It kind of has a bit of a crunk production, which is interesting. It's interesting because usually when I think Britney Spears, I think of like bubblegum, at least, back in her youth or younger years. But this is very crunkish with various other styles. This album is interesting because each song, not all of them, but a lot of the songs have like a different influence that come in, like some Middle Eastern or a country, like deep South kind of sound that comes in on the second song, or like some, again, East Asian sound. So like that makes listening to this very interesting. I think it's a great pop album. I have nothing else to say about it. Next, I have her, I don't fucking know, 2016 album Glory. This is the first one I got. I got it for $1 at Out of the Closet because I wanted to use the jewel case, and I ended up listening to it on a whim, and I actually really, really like this album. It's a just really nice, modern pop. Like, it's just a great pop album, period. It has some, like, acoustic guitars on it, which I usually am, like, allergic to in pop music, but here it sounds really nice. And it has, again, some, like, other kind of atmospheric, spacey sounds on it that I think work great with her voice. Yeah, it's fun. It has a variety of moods on it, and she gets to, show off her vocal, abilities a little bit more here than we'd expect because, she's not a great singer anymore. I'm not going to get into the whole spiel about, like, her voice, decay. It's not relevant. Anyways, great album, though. Really fun. The last thing I have is a band I've talked about before when I hauled it earlier last year. And I hate this fucking thing. This is Bullet for My Valentine, Fever. I have yet to get rid of this. It's, like, super, like, two-dimensional poppy metalcore with very little harsh vocal. It's very, like, raw, Rasputin. No. It's very, like, crowd pleasing is, like, the idea it's supposed to convey, but it just made me kind of seethe. Did not enjoy this. Yeah, I don't know. It feels very, like, catering to a 12-year-old audience. And that's all I can say about it. Fuck this album and its stupid existing. And that's all I got. That's the last of my Bs. Again, I really don't have a lot of, Bs in general, but especially, like, in metal, there's a lot of blacks and bloods and stuff that I really don't listen to. The only one of those that I have here is Bloodflowerz, the German band. And that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching.